Our presenter today is Arthur Seaman. Arthur is located in the Pacific Northwest in Anacortes, Washington, where he is a port captain for Marathon Petroleum. He is an alum of SUNY Maritime College, where he graduated with a bachelor's degree in maritime transportation. Arthur holds an unlimited tonnage master's license, as well as an MBA from Southern New Hampshire University. Ladies and gentlemen, Arthur Seaman.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me, and I'm happy to be here to share some of my insight on the maritime industry and my career progressions and where I currently am right now. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and bring up our presentation today. So the focus of today's presentation is going to be ship to shore and a whole lot more. Some of the topics we'll discuss, and I'm going to try and keep this relatively short and leave plenty of time for a Q&A session at the end. But we'll go through an introduction, some life at sea, oil and gas, transportation, career pathways, and some tips and takeaways from my time so far in the industry. So after getting out of school from SUNY Maritime College, I went to sea. I sailed for Overseas Ship Management, OSG, on some of their tankers. They're a U.S. tanker company, and primarily sailed in the Gulf of Mexico, U.S. East Coast, and transatlantic Mediterranean voyages. I sailed on 6 of their vessels throughout the fleet and sailed my way from third mate to second mate to first mate. I wanted to just briefly explain some of the breakdown for what life at sea looks like. You primarily have 2 departments, deck and engine. You usually also have a steward's department on most ocean-going vessels today. But these are the 2 typical pathways for going to sea. And you can work your way up from deckhand, able-bodied seaman, bosun is the head of the deck department, and then you get into the officer ranks of mates, which traditionally has been third mate, second mate, chief mate, captain. And then on the engineering side, you have wipers and oilers as entry-level positions into pumpmen. And then you have your assistant engineers, which typically mirror the mate's trajectory of third engineer, second assistant engineer, first, all the way up to chief. The typical complement on most ocean-going vessels today sits between 20 and 25 persons. Some of the vessels today, they'll carry cadets or some extra personnel, but the vessel crews over time have definitely gotten pretty small. It was late 1950s, 1960s, it was not uncommon to see vessel crews 2 to 3 times that size, where they were carrying a lot more people. Much of the technology that we have on board the vessels today was not present, and there was a lot more manual labor on most of these ships, which included a lot of the cargo operations. So when you're talking about life at sea, it's really important to sort of look at some of the other things that surround just the structure of the crew complement. And it really starts with vessel types. You've got tankers, container ships, cruise ships, research vessels, fishing vessels, and you can go down and down the line, ferries, tugs, inland barges. And the vessel types and the cargo types are inextricably linked. Container ships will obviously carry containers and a lot of dry goods. Oil tankers are going to carry different liquid bulk cargoes and chemicals. And as each vessel type and cargo type sort of interact with each other, you look at specific trade patterns. So, if you're on a container ship or you on a transatlantic voyage going from, Gulf Coast USA or East Coast USA to Northern Europe, are you on a, Asia, US West Coast trade pattern? Same thing with tankers, US Gulf, whether you're trading Jones Act, which would be inter-US trade, Texas to Florida, for example, or sailing far and internationally, again, transatlantic over to Africa, West Coast, South America, Middle East, Red Sea, Suez. So those trade patterns also start to take effect. So you've got the crew complement, your vessel type, cargo type, and trade patterns. Then that feeds into work tours, which ocean-going vessels, the work tours tend to be much longer. For U.S. ships, they range typically from 75 to 90 days. But many of the foreign flagged vessels, sea work tours as long as 9 or 10 months at a time. We mentioned crew size, and then owner charter comes in with the owners of the vessel and the operators who owns the physical asset and who owns the cargo. So all of those things really go to complement what life at sea is like and some of the different opportunities and pathways there are. Should you want to go to sea. So specific to oil and gas marine transportation, I got into tankers because in the U.S. fleet, it is the largest segment of shipping business that there is for U.S. flagged vessels. U.S. flagged tankers, there's quite a bit because of the Jones Act and because there is so much inter-U.S. trade in the U.S. Gulf, U.S. West Coast, and U.S. East Coast. So a couple statistics here from U.S. Energy Information Administration, or the EIA, is roughly 61% of the world's crude oil travels by sea. And some of this is a little bit outdated. It's back from 2015 from their last major study, but it was equivalent to just short of 60 million barrels per day. So that's a significant amount of oil being moved. And this is just focused on crude oil. And we'll get into some of the different types of oil and how they fit in and how they're transported and what upstream and downstream really means and what that global footprint looks like. But the bottom line, the key word here today is really opportunity, because there is a truly a diverse offering of jobs and career paths, both at sea and ashore, not just in the maritime space, but specific to this oil and gas transportation and what we like to call bulk liquid transport. So we'll keep that in mind as we go into these next few slides and as you ask some questions toward the end. But this is critical. And just for reference, like the photos you see in your screen, smaller vessels, what we'll call MR, or medium size, medium range tankers that are about 600 feet long, which is what I was used to working on, will typically carry between 300 and 325,000 barrels. Some larger vessels, the large VLCCs, can carry upwards of 2 million. But just crude oil alone, you're talking 59 million barrels in a day. And very few voyages last just a single day. So you can take that and, really let your imagination run and understand just how many vessels there are out there, thousands upon thousands of tankers worldwide, carrying not just the raw product, but also refined products to their final destination. So when we talked about upstream and downstream and how this factors into the maritime industry, it's not often discussed, and it's sometimes misunderstood. And I thought this graphic from the American Fuel and Petrochemical Manufacturers Association was very good. So the oil industry, as we know it, is really several different industries. First, you've got upstream, which is where you extract feedstocks to produce fuels and petrochemicals. And this is the initial extraction of crude oil from the ground. This can happen both on land and at sea. So maritime touches upstream very much in areas like the Gulf of Mexico and the North Sea, where you have a lot of offshore drilling. Then you've got midstream, and this moves this crude oil and feedstocks, natural gas, from the initial site of production to where it's going to be processed, or a refinery. So crude oil transportation. So in this area, you see the ship graphic. This is where we're talking about that, roughly 59 million barrels a day that's being moved. So crude oil, but we also can touch on natural gas and other products being moved from point A to point B. So this is your sort of mid upstream going to the refineries. Then it hits various refineries around the world. It gets processed. And then you've got the midstream. So after this product gets refined, now you've got several different products that are now getting ready to go out to the market. So you need to store these and get ready to repackage and transport these, again, on vessels and train cars and trucks. But many of the times, these refineries are located in, strategically important areas. And, one of the best ways to transport these in bulk is with vessels. And then it hits the final market and consumers, things like factories and processing plants where things can be reprocessed, or airports. And if you're making transportation fuels, it'll ultimately end up at gas stations and in your homes for things like heating oil. This is a brief overview from Energy Information Administration on some of the shipping routes. And this was a rough graphic that shows just how many million barrels per day are moving through some of these various choke points. And this doesn't match up exactly with the 60. This is kind of looking at some other products as well, but it gives you a pretty good idea when we were talking about trading patterns and going to see where some of these major trading patterns are. So U.S. East Coast going to Europe, Northern Europe. You can go through the Strait of Gibraltar, through the Mediterranean. A lot of activity going on in the Middle East. So you've got that from the Eastern Mediterranean down through the Suez Canal there, the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, between the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea. And then you get up to the Straits of Hormuz into the Persian Gulf. Strait of Malacca, Southeast Asia, another major trading route, just with the large populations there in Southeast Asia. And then now the Cape of Good Hope area around South Africa, which historically had started to go away, but with a lot of unrest in the Red Sea over the last couple of years, that trading route has actually been being really revitalized in a way that most people did not expect. And then you obviously have the Panama Canal as a cross through between Caribbean Sea, Gulf of Mexico, and the Pacific. So truly a global footprint and a worldwide industry, when often we're just thinking about maybe our local gas station or a local refinery that's near to us, or an industry right here in the United States. This is, I thought this was good from Illinois Petroleum Resource Board, the IPRB, and this looks at U.S. consumption of petroleum products by type. And, the paragraph below, I think, sums it up pretty well, where, we often read a lot that, we may not need oil and that the oil industry is in an existential crisis. But the reality is that we need a lot of this for many decades to come. And, gasoline alone just represents 45% of the U.S. petroleum consumption. So, even if electric cars replaced burning vehicles tomorrow, you still need oil for the 55% of consumption that's happening outside of just driving your vehicle. So when we talked about upstream, midstream, downstream, what are these products that are being refined? So we've got roughly 60 million barrels a day just moving on the water, a lot more moving elsewhere in pipelines that don't need to touch vessels. But a lot of those fuels are then being refined into things like distillates, where you're going and providing diesel fuels and gasoline and other transportation fuels for heavy trucking, transport, rail, farming. You get down into the hydrocarbon liquids there, and you see a lot of these are used as feedstock for making petroleum products and petrochemicals. And the petrochemical industry is massive. And these are used to make essential products in medical, pharmaceutical, tech, and even renewable energy infrastructure. Windmills, solar panels, many of these renewable industries do still rely on traditional fossil fuels in order to be built. Everything from our phones to the clothing we're wearing to the furniture and chairs we're likely sitting on at some point has touched petroleum products at some point in their life. And then you get down to the lower products that come out of a barrel of crude oil. And, you look at things like jet fuel. And then, I love this, that there's, more than 6,000 other petroleum-based products that, include rubber and asphalt, road, lubricants, wax, things like crayons and cosmetics, paints, so much more. So, the roads we drive on, the tires that are on our car, it really is a facet of our everyday life that we often don't necessarily think about when we think about refining and petroleum transportation. We usually narrow it down to, crude oil and gasoline, and that could certainly go away. When in reality, it's a lot more complex than that, and it's used in really so many industries and so many facets of our life. And you can see the consumption, and this represents the demand side, again, strictly in the U.S. from 1950 through just about 2020, and it's pretty significant. And peak oil demand globally, analysts do point to potentially here in the next few years before a plateauing. But we've been in a period of growth now for the last several decades. So transitioning sea to shore. So with so much going on in the industry, and the fact that this industry touches every facet of our life, there is what I'd like to call a vast sea of opportunity. So we started with life at sea. You can go to sea, work on ships. What's next? And I think this just really highlights the diversity of career paths that are available. Not just in petroleum transportation and refining, um, but really in the maritime industry in general. There's so much overlap within these industries. Again, from ship captain and chief engineer, if we go down and pick a couple, naval architect, when you're building and designing these vessels and rigs and other on water transportation, safety has become just such a huge factor for the industry and for individual companies. Port captain, which we'll talk about in a little while, since that's my current title. You've got cargo surveyors and class inspectors, being such a highly regulated industry. Um, the jobs on that front, from the U.S. Coast Guard to classification societies such as ABS or Bureau Veritas, crewing coordinator. Obviously, with all these ships at sea, you've got a lot of people to manage, and those folks need to travel to the vessel and travel home. And on a global scale, crew members are coming from all over the world. So that becomes so important to everyday operations and to the success of many of these shipping companies. And then we get into some of the more niche roles of security specialists or shipyard managers and technical superintendents on the engineering side, subsea engineers if you're working offshore, cable operations. So really, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity, not just going to sea, but also shoreside with a number of different companies. This is a beautiful picture of where I live and work now in Anacortes, Washington, home to two of Washington's 5 refineries. And those refineries are just out of the picture here off to the right-hand side. So the Pacific Northwest is truly a beautiful place, and one that I'm very happy to call home. So my role as port captain, roles and responsibilities, what does that look like for a port captain? Really, it boils down to these sort of 9 different points, and it's a technical subject matter expert. So I take my time and my license and everything I've learned at school and going to sea and taking license exams, and I'm able to bring it ashore to a marine terminal where most other folks that work here have not gone to sea, but we see a lot of vessels on a day-to-day basis. So I can help sort of be a translator of sorts and a ship to shore intermediary between the terminal and the vessel, because I've worked on the vessel. I know the vessel operations now being employed by the terminal. You get to know the inside and operations and how that works. I get down there and do vessel inspections with a lot of safety and environmental oversight. The Pacific Northwest and U.S. West Coast is some of the most highly regulated marine resources in the entire world. So not only do you have regulations at the IMO level, but then you've got it at the federal level enforced by the Coast Guard and the EPA. You've got it at the state level enforced by folks like the Washington Department of Ecology, or in California, you'd have organizations like the California Air Resource Board. Then you get down to local regulations in specific county jurisdictions or cities and city councils that have passed their own laws. So it really weaves a very intricate and complicated web of regulations where there's a lot of parties involved, and it does require quite a bit of oversight and some expert knowledge into how to comply with a lot of these rules. And that kind of feeds into reviewing documentation and just how important it is to engage with industry. I sit on the board of directors for the emergency response towing vessel at Nia Bay. I chair the Northwest Marine Committee for the Western States Petroleum Association, and have a voting seat on the Puget Sound Harbor Safety Committee, representing our industry here in the Pacific Northwest. And it's important to bring together folks with a variety of different experiences and perspectives and different industries to achieve many of those safety and environmental goals that we seek to achieve here. Working with community stakeholders, Washington State is unique in that there are a lot of treaty protected areas and tribes that we don't necessarily see involved in the maritime space nearly as much elsewhere in the country. Many environmental groups up here in the Northwest as well, and really just an array of different shipping opportunities. There's a lot of Navy activity in Puget Sound with Bremerton Shipyard and Naval Air Station Whidbey Island. You've got Bainbridge, big container terminals. You've got a lot of bulk export. Washington is a major food producer, so there's a lot of agriculture. You see that also coming down the Columbia River from Portland. It's 5 oil refineries here in the state of Washington. And then we share an international border with Canada and a major international port of Vancouver. So you have a lot of pass-through traffic from, Port Angeles as you work your way in the Sound to Vancouver, BC, Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia, and then you get down into the Columbia River going through Astoria and Portland. So really a kind of a large region to work in the space and to get to know people and do business in this very unique community. So if I had some tips and techniques for folks who are out there and looking back, if I had to do it again, some of these things are really points that I feel pretty strongly about. One is to continue to invest in yourself. And that is, whether it's going to school or, putting aside money after your first job, that could look a lot of different, that can look very different to different people, but investing in yourself is very important to ensure that, you can maintain a level of independence and really a level of career that you want and, that you're fully in control of going forward and into your future. The other is to never settle, never stop learning. I went to school, went to Maritime, graduated, went to sea, upgraded my license, went back to grad school. And it doesn't need to be, sort of a strict or a formal education setting. It could be something as simple as learning new systems on the ship or cross-training with a different department. Or reading some different material and books that interest you, but really never settling, never stop learning, always pushing yourself to learn a little bit more makes you such a valuable asset to yourself and to the company that you'll work for in the future. Becoming a good listener, this is key, and this was key in a book I read that was written by Richard Branson, the CEO of the Virgin brand. And being a good listener, I really can't express this enough. And it's so important that when you go in and you meet with people or you have your first job and you're really out and learning and you're open eyes and open ears, that you bring a pad and paper with you or an iPad or an iPhone and you take some notes, and you really act interested. And it goes such a long way, because you come back and you realize that you take so much more out of a meeting with someone or a tour of a facility when you're able to go back and reflect on some of that with your own notes. Building a strong network. The maritime industry is, while it is small, it is also vast. And for many of us who are involved, you know what I mean. It's so important to have those connections, to build those networks, both when you're at school, when you're in the workplace, because those just continue to sort of carry you through, and they've carried me through my career. It's really been through a strong network of alumni and with friends and family and people who I'm close with that has helped me get to where I am today. And that's this show up in person. Any opportunity you have to go to a meeting in person, if it's hybrid and you can sign in online or you could be there in person, I would 100% recommend, especially early in your career, that you go and you get the face time with those folks. And that really pays dividends, I think, later in your career. Sometimes it's not always possible. The travel's not possible, or you're too busy. But that is one thing that I've seen. Many successful business leaders in the industry are very adamant about being there in person when you can. So, if there were meetings or conferences or things like that, being able to come together really makes all the difference. And the last two, don't be afraid to move. I do find, especially after school, it's very easy to, want to move back right to, where you grew up. And sometimes that's the best decision for you, but really being as open-minded as you can be and being able to cast a wide net when it comes to job opportunities is very important, because jobs that, may not be available in Texas could pop up in New York, or there could be opportunities in California. And often when we kind of relegate ourselves to a specific area of the country that we don't want to leave at all, it limits a lot of opportunities. So the wider you can cast that net in the U.S., around the world, the better that can be. So, I highly encourage that. The more you travel, the more you learn, so you can get out there. And the maritime industry is an international, global business, and it certainly helps to be able to be around. And the last one is don't forget to give back. So, it's important for me to do things like this and share some of my experiences and things that have helped me along the way, and why I'm so grateful to be part of such a great industry, and have so many friends that feel the same way. So any opportunity to give back, to go back to the schools, to talk with students, and mentor folks along the way. Again, you don't get to where you are in your career doing it alone. So by building that strong network, but also giving back, and being able to be the one that can be there to offer some tips of the trade and advice, I think is really helpful. So with that said, I wanted to offer some of my contact info to anyone who's interested. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. Again, plenty of friends and coworkers and folks throughout the industry, from recruiters to friends and family who are still at sea, and people who are shoreside. So whether it's looking for a job or questions on a project, or even just collaborating as from a different company, and wanting to know something, happy to share my opinion and talk and expand the network. So that's what we have today. So hopefully, if there's some questions, I'm happy to stay around and answer those. And otherwise, I appreciate everybody's time today.
All right, thank you, Arthur. So anyone out there, you could go to the Q&A area, and please feel free to ask any question that you have for Arthur. I do have our first one already, and the first one says, I'm impressed with your career path and great advice to students. Can you address how membership in the International Propeller Club has assisted you in your career?
So as I was alluding to sort of in the last slide with building that network, that is critical. And I think organizations like the International Propeller Club, I was involved in the Propeller Club when I was at school. I'm involved in the local chapter, Seattle Propeller Club, or Puget Sound Propeller Club out here in the Northwest. And those events, those different webinars like this, you really get to see a lot of different people's perspectives. You can see the various industries that they work in. You can ask them questions. You really get to know other people. And those are things that, right now you may not think are important, but 5 or 10 years down the line, you run into someone again and you have that connection from, when you were a member of an organization. And building that network and being able to be there in person when possible is really, I can't say enough about it. So that I'm very grateful for that, and grateful to still be a part of Propeller Club organizations locally in the ports.
All right, our next question says, thank you very much, sir. One question, what kind of position, what kind of position is for a college student as entry level to enter the field?
So you've got quite a bit of opportunity. And the first one is, do you want to go to sea, or do you want to start shoreside at kind of initially? Going to sea, there's several different shipping unions and labor unions that typically will help progress and get your foot in the door. Many of the maritime colleges, maritime academies, and institutes around the world also offer, whether it's, if you're already in college, whether it's bachelor's degree, you can go and get a master's and potentially a license with that. So you can go license route. You can get your foot in the door with, again, something like sailing, taking a job off one of the sailing boards. So a few different opportunities there. With shoreside, I would highly recommend, if you could at least start with some level of apprenticeship while you're at school, apprenticeship, internship. Get in with a company, even if it's in an area that you don't think you'll work in at all. If you want to get into heavy industry, but you can get an internship with a cruise line company. Well, that'll help you build some people skills. Maybe you learn the backing of HR. there is no such thing as a wasted experience. Even if it seems like it's completely different than what you want to do, you can still take areas from that and help build on that later in your career. So, I would really look at those, you know, entry level internships because they typically can evolve into other jobs. And they're jobs that may take you out of the maritime industry, which is okay because you can always come back. But really, being open to a lot of different opportunities is key to that.
Okay. What technical skills do you consider most important in your role?
Um, a lot of math and science. The maritime industry in general is very engineering heavy, even though you're a deck license or if you go and sail as a mate or a captain, oh, you're not an engineer. But tankers and the oil and gas industry is, extremely science heavy. So mechanical engineering, marine engineering, electrical engineering, today software engineering, those skills are vital and will not be going away. There are also technical soft skills. I think people management and behavioral management and learning how to interact and manage people is also very important. So it's a balance between the two. But really, if you want the widest array of opportunity, the the engineering route and really being able to focus on the technical side of our business, I I truly believe gives you the largest opportunity. And that could still mean that you go to school as a deck officer or you go back to school and become a business major. But really laying that groundwork and understanding how things work from a technical perspective is important.
Right. What do you enjoy most about being a port captain, and what keeps you motivated in this role?
Being a port captain is a lot of fun because we get to do so many different things on a daily basis. Port captains, I don't just show up at work every day, sit at a desk, sit behind my computer, and work for 8 hours, close my laptop, and go home. It truly is a 24/7, 365 day a year job where I'm supporting captains and crews who are at sea, who know they have a resource, here at home at the terminal. We've got vessels whose schedule is always changing. You wake up in the morning and you can turn on your computer, turn on the news, and you're just sort of waiting for the day to unfold. Vessel schedules are very dynamic. The industry is always changing, and even things as simple as weather or a windy afternoon can throw an entirely well-planned day sort of out of whack. So I love just how many different things that I'm able to do in my role, whether it's advocacy for our industry, working on specific safety standards and safety committees to conducting vessel inspections in person at the terminal. Really having just so many different things to do um, gives you a lot of tools in your toolbox for interacting with different people, and there's no such thing as a boring day.
That's why I always enjoyed logistics and operations myself. Well, I appreciate it so much. It was very insightful. I think lots of people enjoyed that. Thank you so much. And I wish we could give you a round of applause, but I don't think you would hear everyone on that. So I appreciate it. Very, very exciting. Thank you.
No, thanks for having me, Jeremy. I appreciate being here, and please, take my contact information and reach out at any time. I'd be happy to happy to talk and help connect some folks with anything they may be interested in what they heard today.
Absolutely. We greatly appreciate it. We got a couple claps going on. All right, I'm going to turn this over to students. I know that we have at least a few student ports here. Please at least have someone in your student port if you're here. We'd like you to at least hear your voice and have you say who your name, what student port you're from, and if you did anything exciting in the past month. So just raise your hand or speak in the chat, and then we will unmute you. I know I see a few here. I see there's a Braden. I see Elizabeth, Lamb. There's a lot of different students here. Hello. All right. Could we maybe unmute Braden? Because I know Braden had did something really cool.
Oh, look.
Hello.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, what were you saying before, Jeremy? I missed what you asked me to say.
What university are you from? And did you do anything interesting in the past 30 days?
Oh, well. Hello, everybody. My name is Braden Geibel. I am the president of the University of North Florida, student port of the Propeller Club. We've done some pretty cool things the past month. I know just last night, us and Kaiser University's student port, we went on to the USS Orlick, a retired warship. Had a little get together there. That was fun. We've also gone to some facility tours around the Jacksonville area, which is where we're located. We went to a JP Hunt intermodal facility. So we have a good time. It's pretty cool. That's about it.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we got together with the Jacksonville board with both Kaiser University and University of North Florida. So we had about 38 students in attendance on that one. All right, could we, looks like maybe Lam wants to, so could we unmute N Lam Ung?
Hello.
Go
Can you
ahead,
hear me,
Lam.
sir?
Yes.
Okay. Hello. My name is Lam Ongsanla, and everybody call me Lam. So I am from Jacksonville, Kaiser University, and I'm learning transportation and logistic. So so this is the very privilege to be participate in this Zoom meeting. I learn a lot, and then it's kind of motivating as a young people to us. It was very very good, and I've really appreciated Dr. Smith and sir. Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, I think we saw more students. I'm not sure which one they're from. Do we have more students out there? If so, be proud of your school. All right, maybe we have some that are shy because I know we have more schools out there. All right, so I'm going to let you know that our 98th annual International Propeller Club Conference will be October 13th through October 15th in Lyon, France. We're doing our best to find sponsors for students to help with the cost in Lyon. Please reach out to me, Dr. Smith, for further details if your student port is interested in attending. We always have a great time at the international events. We have a focus for the students. So there is a student focus on this. You will learn a lot, and you will be able to meet students from all around the world, and in this case, definitely through Europe. Our next Zoom meeting will be February 21st from 12 to 1. Our guest speaker in February will be Lisa Diaz, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at Horizon Auto Logistics. So I look forward to seeing all of you then. Thank you so much. Farewell. And hopefully I'll see all of you in about a month.